The morning sky over New London turned dark without warning. At first, people thought it was another storm rolling in from the ocean. But when the clouds split open with a loud metallic hum, they saw it. Ships unlike anything built by human hands. Sleek, silver, and sharp-edged, the alien fleet descended like blades cutting through the sky. Each vessel moved in perfect formation, glowing with blue energy. Crowds filled the streets, phones in hand, recording every moment. Some screamed in fear. Others whispered in awe. When the ships landed on the outskirts of the city, the ground trembled. Dust rose like a curtain. Then the air shimmered, and a group of alien women stepped out. Tall, graceful, and armored in shining scales that glowed like molten steel. They were warriors from the planet Virilia, known across the galaxy for their power and pride. Their leader, Commander Zyra, walked in front. Her golden eyes scanned the humans like one might study insects. She lifted her hand, and her voice echoed through a strange floating device that amplified her words for miles. "People of Earth," she announced coldly. "We come not for war, but for judgment." Reporters and soldiers surrounded the area, trying to speak, but Zyra ignored them. She turned to her warriors and laughed softly. "These creatures call themselves humans," she said. "Look at their fragile bodies. Their weapons are primitive. Their cities crumble under their own weight. How did such a weak species survive this long?" Her army of warrior women laughed with her, a chorus of mockery that spread through the air like poison. Some humans shouted back in anger, others hid. The humiliation burned deep. Among the onlookers was an old woman standing at the edge of the crowd. She wore a simple gray coat, her hair silver, her eyes calm. Her name was Mara. No one noticed her at first. But when Zyra's soldiers began kicking over market stalls and mocking human art, Mara stepped forward. "Enough," she said softly. The laughter stopped. Zyra turned her golden gaze toward her, amused. "Who speaks?" she demanded. Mara walked closer, steady despite her age. "I do," she said. "This is our home. You may have your fancy ships and armor, but you stand on Earth. Show respect." The alien warriors broke into laughter again. Zyra tilted her head, smiling like a predator. "Respect from us? Do you think your people can earn it, old woman?" Mara met her eyes without fear. "You have not met all of my people yet," she replied. Zyra chuckled. "Then where are they? Hiding in caves? Scared behind your stone walls?" Mara's expression didn't change. She looked up at the alien ships filling the sky and said quietly, "My sons are not home yet." The tone of her voice, steady, confident, sent a ripple through the crowd. Even the soldiers nearby turned to look at her. Zyra frowned. "Your sons?" she asked. "Do you believe a few human males can stand against my army?" Mara smiled faintly. "They do not stand against armies. Armies fall before them." The alien commander laughed again, louder this time. Her laughter was cold, cruel, echoing over the broken streets. She gestured toward her soldiers. "Perhaps we should meet these great sons of yours," she mocked. "Where are they hiding? In your little house?" But Mara did not answer. She only turned her gaze toward the far horizon, where misty mountains rose in the distance. The crowd followed her eyes, but they saw nothing, only dark clouds moving above the peaks. Then, suddenly, a low rumble rolled through the ground. The air vibrated. Windows rattled. The alien soldiers lifted their weapons, scanning for threats. A few seconds later, the sound faded, but the tension stayed. Mara looked back at Zyra and said softly, "You mock Earth because you see only what is weak. But Earth hides its strength well." Zyra narrowed her eyes. "Old woman, your words mean nothing," she said. "Tomorrow I will test your world. Bring your strongest. Let them face us in the trial of worlds." She turned and walked back toward her ship, leaving behind the echo of her arrogance. Her soldiers followed, laughing once more. The fleet lifted off into the night sky, leaving a trail of light that burned across the clouds. The humans stood silent. Reporters whispered about trial of worlds. Soldiers exchanged worried looks. And in the middle of it all, Mara stood still, her eyes fixed on the mountains. A young soldier approached her. "Ma'am," he asked quietly, "do you really think we can fight them?" Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. "When my sons return," she said, "you'll see what humans are capable of." That night, as the alien ships hovered like dark stars above the world, a storm gathered over the mountains. Inside that storm, two shadows moved, tall, strong, and silent. Lightning flashed, and for a second their figures appeared against the sky. They were coming home. The world did not sleep that night. Every channel showed the same thing, the alien fleet floating above the Earth like a crown of light. People argued online about the trial of worlds. Some said humanity should surrender. Others said it was a chance to prove themselves. But far away from the noise, in the quiet valleys of the northern mountains, two men stood watching the storm. Kyle and Darren were not like other men. Their bodies carried scars from years of training, and their eyes held a silent fire. They lived alone, far from cities, hunting, building, and training every day under the heavy gravity of the Earth's core zone. Few people even knew they existed. They were ghosts in human form. Inside their small cabin, the air was still. Cale stood by the window, his dark hair wet from rain. Darren cleaned a weapon on the table, its metal glowing faintly blue. They didn't speak for a long time. They didn't need to. Both could feel it, the world had changed. Finally, Darren broke the silence. "They're here, aren't they?" Cale nodded. "I saw the ships from the ridge, Virelians, just like the ones that destroyed Father's colony." Darren's hands froze for a moment. He remembered the screams, the burning sky, and the day everything changed. He had been a child when the Virelians invaded the human colony on Vega 6. They called it cleansing. To them, humans were wild animals taking up space in the galaxy. Only Mara survived the attack, wounded, alone, and pregnant with twin sons. She escaped to Earth and raised them in hiding. Earth's government found them years later. When the boys were 12, the military offered a program, Project Titan. It was meant to create humans who could survive alien worlds, with enhanced strength and faster reflexes. Mara refused at first, but Cale and Darren insisted. They trained for years under crushing gravity, heat, and storms. The program was shut down later, declared too dangerous, but the twins survived. They grew into something different, stronger, faster, sharper. More human than ever, yet more than human too. Now the past had returned. The same alien race that took their father was back, mocking their homeworld. Cale clenched his fists. "They think Earth is weak," he said quietly. "They think humanity will kneel." Darren placed the weapon down and looked at him. "Then we show them what it means to stand." Outside, thunder rolled through the valley. Lightning flashed across their faces, revealing the same fire burning in both their eyes. Far away in the capital, Mara sat in her small apartment, surrounded by reporters who kept asking questions. She ignored them all. Her hand rested on an old communicator, dusty and silent for years. She whispered, "It's time, my sons." Then she pressed the button. Back in the mountains, a small device on the table blinked red. Cale picked it up and smiled faintly. "She called us." Darren nodded. "Then it begins." They packed their old armor, heavy, scratched but unbroken. Every piece of it carried memories of training, pain, and victory. They moved without hurry, calm and steady like soldiers who already knew their fate. When they stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds opened and a pale moon lit their path. In that silence, Kyle said softly, "She waited long enough. Let's go home." As they walked down the slope, their steps left deep marks in the wet soil. Each step felt like a promise to the world they were born to protect. They didn't know how many alien ships waited above or how strong their enemies were. It didn't matter. They were humans. They were sons of Earth. The next day, as the alien fleet prepared their trial, satellites caught movement from the mountains, two life forms moving faster than any vehicle on record. Military scanners failed to identify them. But Mara knew. She stood at her window, eyes full of tears and pride. Her sons were coming, and this time Earth would not stand alone. The next morning, the sun rose behind thick gray clouds. The alien fleet hovered in the sky, dark and silent like watchful predators. Every human eye was turned upward. Governments around the world argued over what to do. Some wanted peace. Some wanted war. But none of them knew that the real answer was already walking toward them from the mountains. In the capital city, the Earth Council gathered inside a glass dome. Screens floated in the air, showing the alien commander's message again and again. Commander Zira had declared the trial of worlds, a battle to test the worth of Earth's species. If humanity lost, their planet would become property of the Virelians. If they won, the aliens would leave in peace. But no one believed they could win. A young general slammed his hand on the table. "We can't fight them. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." An older scientist shook his head. "It's not about technology. It's about pride. They want to humiliate us. The room filled with angry voices, each man shouting his own plan. Then the main doors opened. Everyone fell silent. An old woman stepped inside, Mara. Her calm face was the same one that had confronted Zira in front of the whole world. Mara, the council leader said, standing. Why are you here? You saw what happened. We can't win. Mara looked around the room slowly. Her voice was quiet but strong. You can't win with machines or numbers, she said. But humanity still has something stronger. The general frowned. What could be stronger than their army? Mara's eyes held a small, sad smile. My sons, she said. They will fight the trial of worlds. The room burst into disbelief. Voices rose again. Your sons? Are you serious? We need soldiers, not farmers. You can't risk civilians? Mara waited until the noise faded. They are not civilians, she said. They are the sons of Earth itself. Before anyone could speak again, the lights flickered. A tremor passed through the ground. From outside came the sound of roaring engines. People ran to the windows and saw two figures walking through the city gates. The guards at the entrance froze. The men were tall, dressed in dark armor made of steel and carbon fiber. Their steps were heavy but controlled. The people whispered their names, Kale and Darren. They looked human, yet there was something unearthly about them. Their eyes glowed faintly in the morning light. Mara turned toward the glass wall, her face calm. They are here, she said softly. When Kale and Darren entered the council hall, silence filled the air. Kale looked at the generals, at the screens showing alien ships, and then at his mother. We saw the challenge, he said. We accept it. No one argued. Something in his tone silenced even the most skeptical voices. They could feel power in his words. Not arrogance, but certainty. A messenger soon arrived from the alien camp. Zara had sent her terms. Tomorrow, the message said. Your strongest will face ours at dawn. If they lose, Earth kneels, Kel simply nodded. Then tomorrow we stand. That night, the whole planet waited. In the alien base outside the city, Commander Zyra looked out over the glowing skyline. Her soldiers laughed as they trained with energy blades. She smirked. Humans are so predictable. They'll send soldiers with guns and hope for miracles. But her second-in-command approached nervously. Commander, the human fighters, they are not soldiers. Reports say 2 men only. Zira raised an eyebrow. 2? She laughed coldly. Then Earth wants to die with dignity. Back in the human camp, Kale sat beside a small fire, cleaning his armor. Darren stood by the window, looking at the alien ships shining like stars. Do you think they'll understand what they're facing? He asked. Kale shook his head. They don't need to understand. They just need to remember this day. Mara walked up to them, her face proud and full of quiet fear. She touched both their shoulders. Whatever happens, she whispered, fight not for revenge, but for what it means to be human. Kyle looked at her and said softly, We always have, Mother. Outside, lightning flashed across the clouds again, and thunder rolled through the night sky. The next dawn would decide the fate of their world. The aliens thought they were coming for a fight. But what they were about to meet were not just men, they were the living spirit of Earth itself, and they were ready. The morning came with a red sky. The battlefield was a wide desert plain outside the capital. The alien fleet floated above like silent watchers. Dust moved in slow waves as thousands gathered to see what would happen. Humans stood behind barricades, soldiers ready, cameras rolling, hearts pounding. On the other side stood the Virelian warriors, tall, armored, and shining in silver light. Their leader, Commander Zira, stood in front, calm and confident. Her armor reflected the rising sun, her eyes cold as ice. Behind her stood 10 of the finest warriors from her world, each trained in the arts of war for decades. Their weapons glowed with energy, humming like angry spirits. The humans waited quietly. No machines, no tanks, no drones. Just 2 figures walking out of the morning mist, Kale and Darren. They moved with steady steps, their armor dark and rough compared to the aliens' polished suits. Their helmets were simple. Their bodies carried no glowing weapons. They only held metal blades crafted by human hands. The crowd fell silent as they passed. Even the wind seemed to pause. Commander Zira raised an eyebrow. These are your champions? She said, her voice full of mockery. 2 men with sticks? Kale stopped a few steps away from her and lifted his gaze. We don't need more, he said simply. The alien warriors laughed. One stepped forward, tall and proud. spinning her blade in the air. She lunged fast, too fast for human eyes to follow, but Kale didn't move until the last moment. His arm shot up, catching her glowing weapon in his bare hand. A sharp crack filled the air as he twisted it aside and struck her chest once with his fist. The alien flew backward across the sand, landing hard and unconscious. Silence spread. Even Zira looked surprised. Her soldiers stared in disbelief. Kale dropped the broken weapon to the ground. "Next," he said quietly. Darren smiled faintly beside him. Another alien rushed forward, shouting in rage. She spun her twin blades, sending sparks through the air. Darren moved lightly, dodging each strike. Then he stepped in close, grabbed her arm, and flipped her over his shoulder. She hit the ground hard, her weapon flying from her hand. The humans watching roared in shock and pride. The aliens no longer laughed. Zira lifted her hand, signaling her remaining warriors to attack together. 6 of them charged as one. Blades flashed, sand flew, energy hissed in the air. Kale and Darren moved like shadows, silent, smooth, unstoppable. Every motion was perfect timing, every strike clean and controlled. The sound of metal meeting metal echoed like thunder. One by one the aliens fell. Some dropped their weapons. Others tried to rise and failed. Zira's face hardened. She stepped forward, pulling her own sword from her back. The blade glowed bright blue, humming with dangerous power. "Enough games," she said coldly. "Now you face me." Kyle nodded once. The two closed the distance in a heartbeat. Her first swing split the air with a loud hiss, but Kale blocked it with his arm guard. The force pushed him back a step, but he didn't fall. He countered with a kick that sent sand flying. She blocked it, her armor sparking from the impact. They circled each other, eyes locked. Every movement was fast but precise, like a dance between equals. The crowd watched in silence, breaths held. Darren stood nearby, guarding against any ambush. When one alien tried to attack from behind, he threw his blade through the air. It hit perfectly, disarming the attacker in one motion. Kale and Zira's blades clashed again. She swung high, but he ducked low, punching her midsection. The impact made her stumble. For a moment, she looked up at him, eyes wide, not in pain, but in realization. She had underestimated him. Underestimated them all. Kale lowered his weapon and stepped back. "We don't fight for glory," he said. "We fight for home." Zira looked around at her fallen soldiers, breathing hard. Then she smiled, a strange, almost respectful smile. "You are not what I expected," she said. The humans began to cheer. For the first time, the aliens stayed silent. Kale reached out a hand to help her up, but before she could respond, the ground trembled again. From the alien ships above, a deeper rumble began. Something was being activated. Zira turned sharply toward the sky, her expression changing from pride to fear. "This wasn't my order," she said softly. Kyle and Darren looked up as the shadow of a massive cannon began to open under the main ship. Something far worse was about to begin. The trial was not over. It had only just started. The sky turned red as the alien cannon powered up above the battlefield. The deep hum of energy filled the air, making the ground shake. Everyone looked up in fear. Commander Zira shouted orders to her soldiers to stand down, but the cannon did not stop. Someone inside the fleet had gone against her command. Kale looked at his brother. "Darren, they're going to fire on everyone," he said. Darren's eyes narrowed. "Then we stopped them." Before Zira could react, both brothers sprinted across the battlefield toward the nearest alien ship. Their speed was unreal. Dust rose behind them like a storm. Human soldiers watched in shock as the two men moved faster than vehicles could track. The alien troops opened fire, but Kale and Darren dodged through the blasts, every step precise. Zira turned to her remaining warriors. "Stand down," she ordered. "This is not our doing." But one of her lieutenants ignored her, shouting that humans must die. The rogue officer raised a weapon and fired directly at Kale. Darren pushed his brother aside and took the hit. He fell hard, smoke rising from his armor. Kale caught him before he hit the ground. Blood ran down Darren's shoulder, but he smiled weakly. "I'm fine," he said. "Finish it." Kale stood up, silent and calm, his eyes burning with cold fury. He walked forward through the smoke. The alien soldiers fired again, but Kale moved like a shadow, breaking weapons, disarming warriors, never stopping. Every strike was clean. Every movement was full of purpose. He wasn't fighting for revenge. He was fighting for honor. Above them, the cannon reached full power. Its light painted the sky white. If it fired, the entire valley would be destroyed. Kyle ran up a slope of broken metal and jumped, grabbing hold of a landing platform as it descended. He climbed onto the alien ship with bare hands punching through glass and steel. Inside, the control room was chaos. The rogue officer who had fired the cannon sat at the console shouting orders. Kyle walked toward him, the floor shaking under each step. The officer turned, firing again, but Kyle tore the weapon from his hands and threw it aside. Then he looked at the glowing control sphere that powered the cannon. Without a word, Kyle reached out and pulled the main conduit apart. The light burst, throwing sparks everywhere. A loud explosion followed as the entire cannon shut down, its glow fading into darkness. The ship shook violently, alarms echoing through the air. Outside, the humans and aliens watched as the cannon's light vanished. The threat was gone. Kyle stood on top of the ship, smoke rising behind him, armor scorched but unbroken. He raised his hand once toward the ground, signaling that the battle was over. Commander Zira looked up, her face full of shock and something new, respect. She walked across the field toward Mara, who stood quietly watching everything. Zira bowed her head slightly. "I did not know your people had warriors like that," she said. Mara's voice was calm but firm. "Now you do, and you'll remember." The alien leader looked back at her army, many wounded but alive. Then she turned to her troops and said, "Cease fire. The war ends now." Kyle jumped down from the damaged ship, landing beside Darren, who was sitting up with help from human medics. Kyle helped his brother to his feet. Darren smiled through the pain. "You always take the fun part," he said. Kyle gave a small grin. "You can have the next one." For a moment, everyone watched in silence, the two brothers standing together under the bright, broken sky. The humans began to cheer. Even some alien soldiers lowered their weapons and nodded with quiet respect. Commander Zira raised her voice once more. "Today we fought not for conquest, but for understanding. You have earned our respect, humans. You fight with heart, not hatred. That is something we lost long ago." The crowd roared louder, the sound echoed across the battlefield and into the sky. Earth had stood its ground. The trial was over, but its meaning had just begun to change the galaxy. As Kyle looked up at the silent ships drifting above, he whispered, "Maybe now they'll finally see who we are." Mara smiled softly from afar. "Yes, my sons," she said. "Now they will know what it means to be human." The sun was low in the sky when the battlefield finally fell silent. The alien ships floated above like quiet shadows, no longer glowing with weapons. Smoke rose from broken metal and scorched sand. Humans and aliens moved among the wounded, helping where they could. No one spoke of enemies anymore. They all just breathed, alive, exhausted, changed. Commander Zira stood beside the fallen cannon, her golden armor cracked and dusty. For the first time in her life, she felt small. The humans she had mocked had stood against her entire force and won, not with advanced machines, but with courage and unity. She turned as Kale and Darren walked toward her. Mara followed slowly behind them, her gray coat moving gently in the wind. Zira looked at the human brothers with a strange expression, half respect and half disbelief. "You fight like no race I have seen," she said quietly. "Your strength is not only in muscle, it is something deeper." Mara nodded. "It's what keeps us alive, it's what makes us human." Zira looked away, her eyes unfocused. Then she said something none of them expected. "Our records say, the Varelians came from the core systems long before your people left Earth. But our oldest history speaks of another origin, a forgotten one, a blue planet small and distant." Kyle frowned. "You mean Earth?" Zira hesitated. She pulled out a small device from her armor and activated a hologram. It showed ancient symbols, then a familiar image, a map of the Milky Way with a glowing mark on Earth's position. "This was found in our archives," she said. "It calls this world our first home. It says the Varelians were born of human explorers thousands of years ago. Over time, our bodies changed. We evolved under different suns. We forgot who we were. Mara looked at her sons, her face pale but calm. So all this time, she said softly, you mocked the very blood that made you. Zira's face tightened. Shame flickered in her eyes. She sank to one knee in front of Mara. We lost our history. We lost our heart. I see now that what I called weakness is the very thing that made us strong long ago. The alien soldiers around them lowered their weapons. Some removed their helmets. Many had tears in their eyes for reasons they didn't understand. Kale looked at them all and spoke firmly. Then remember it. The galaxy doesn't need more conquerors. It needs those who can protect, not destroy. For a moment it seemed peace had finally come. But suddenly, an alarm echoed from the sky. A bright light flared from the largest alien ship. Zira looked up in horror. It's my lieutenant. He refuses to stop. A new cannon began charging. The hum of energy filled the air again. This time it was pointed directly at the ground where they stood. Kyle moved instantly. He grabbed Darren, still weak from his wound, and pushed him behind cover. Mara shouted for everyone to get down. Zira pulled out her communicator and screamed for her crew to abort, but it was too late. The cannon fired. A massive wave of blue light struck the ground, throwing sand and metal into the air. Kale covered his mother and brother as the blast tore through the battlefield. For a moment, there was only light and silence. When the dust cleared, Zira was on her knees, her armor scorched. Kale and Darren stood over Mara, shielding her with their bodies. Darren coughed, his armor cracked, smoke rising from his shoulder, but they were alive. The alien lieutenant who fired the cannon stumbled out from the ship, his weapon still glowing. He shouted that humans were a threat, that they must be destroyed. Kyle walked toward him slowly. The alien fired again, but Kale caught the blast with his arm shield and kept walking. He reached the traitor, pulled the weapon away, and crushed it in his hand. Zira rose and faced her soldier. You have dishonored us, she said. Then she turned to Kale. Do what you must. Kyle didn't hesitate. He struck once, fast and clean. The traitor fell. Silence returned. The last echo of violence faded into the wind. Zira looked at Kale and Darren with deep sadness. I swear on my life, she said, the Virelians will never raise arms against Earth again. Mara placed her hand on Zira's shoulder. Then let this be the day your people remember who they truly are. The alien leader nodded. She looked up at the fading sunlight. For the first time in centuries, she said softly, I feel like I am coming home. The sky was quiet again. The war that could have destroyed Earth ended with a silence deeper than any sound. Smoke drifted gently over the battlefield, and the evening sun painted everything gold. Humans and aliens stood together among the ruins, not as enemies, but as survivors of something far greater than war. Kyle stood at the edge of the field, his armor cracked, his face covered in dust. Beside him, Darren sat on a rock, holding his shoulder where the burn still glowed faintly. Their mother Mara walked between them, her steps slow but steady. The wind played softly with her gray hair as she looked around at the mixed crowd of humans and alien warriors helping each other. For the first time in her life, she saw no fear between them, only respect. Commander Zira approached, her armor blackened, her golden eyes no longer cold. She stopped in front of Mara and the brothers and bowed her head deeply. Your world has shown me what mine has forgotten, she said. You fight not for control, but for something pure. Family, home, honor. Kyle looked at her quietly. Maybe now the galaxy will remember that strength isn't about who conquers. It's about who protects. Zira nodded. I will return to Virelia and tell our people the truth. We were born from this world. We owe our existence to the humans we once despised. She looked up at the sky where her ships waited silently. This time we leave not as victors or losers, but as kin. Mara stepped closer and placed her hand gently on Zira's arm. Then go with peace, she said softly. Carry our story to the stars so no one forgets again. Zira turned to her soldiers and gave a single command. The alien ships began to rise, glowing brighter as they climbed into the clouds. One by one they vanished into the sky, leaving trails of light that faded slowly like falling stars. When the last ship disappeared, a deep calm filled the air. Human soldiers started cheering. People hugged, cried, and laughed all at once. They had survived something impossible, and they had done it together. Cale looked up at the stars. He didn't smile. He only stood there in quiet thought. Darren walked beside him, wincing from his wound but grinning anyway. "Do you think they'll actually remember?" he asked. Cale looked at him. "If they don't, we'll remind them." Mara joined them, looking proud. She touched both their shoulders and whispered, "You have done more than fight. You have shown what it means to be human." The brothers said nothing. They didn't need to. The bond between them spoke louder than words. As the night fell, the city lights turned on one by one. Every screen on Earth showed their story. People watched in silence as the footage spread, the two human brothers standing before the alien army, the woman who had faced them without fear, the battle that changed everything. Children whispered their names like heroes from old legends. Cale and Darren became the symbols of a new era. In the weeks that followed, strange things began to happen. Aurelian ships returned not for conquest but for peace. They helped rebuild what was broken. They shared knowledge that healed the planet. Trade routes opened between Earth and the stars. What once began with arrogance ended in alliance. But for Cale and Darren, life returned to quiet. They went back to the mountains where they had trained, where the wind carried the scent of pine and rain. They rebuilt their small cabin side by side just like before. Sometimes, when the night was clear, they could see faint streaks of blue in the sky, the ships of their new allies passing above. Mara would sit by the fire, watching the flames dance. Her heart was full. Her sons had done what no army could. They had reminded the galaxy of something lost, the unbreakable spirit of humanity. One evening, as the stars glowed bright, Darren broke the silence. "Do you think there will ever be peace everywhere?" Mara smiled gently. "Peace is not something you wait for," she said. "It's something you build, one choice at a time." Cale looked toward the horizon. "Then we'll keep building." The firelight flickered over their faces. The mountains stood tall and quiet behind them. The war was over. But the story of Earth had only just begun, and high above, among the stars, the name of Earth was spoken again, not as a world of weakness, but as the birthplace of strength, courage, and heart the galaxy would remember, because two brothers and a mother had reminded it what it truly meant to be human.